Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the National Press Club. I'm Mark Hamrick. I'm the 2011 president of the National Press Club, and we're here tonight in a program that is organized by the National Press Club Journalism Institute. I'm currently the bureau chief for Bankrate.com. So this program will run about an hour. We'll take some questions as we're wrapping up, and before we get going, I want to acknowledge at least one important person who helped to bring this together, and that's our NPC JI director, Julie Hsu. Our guests tonight are two of the power players in, among other things, the organic food and beverage industry. So I'd ask you all now to please give a warm National Press Club welcome to Seth Goldman, co-founder of Bethesda-based Honest Tea, and his friend Gary Hirshberg, co-founder of Stonyfield Farm, the world's leading producer of organic yogurt. We're going to do this maybe a little digital rather than analog. At the very beginning, I'm just going to turn it over to Seth and have him make some opening remarks.
Great, thanks, Mark. And excuse me for standing up, but I'm not good. I will sit down during question and answer, but I just first of all want to welcome everybody. When the book came out, we were thinking we've got to share this with our colleagues. So who are our colleagues in the Washington, D.C. area? Well, there aren't many food companies here, certainly not many natural food companies here. There really aren't many beverage companies here. We don't necessarily think of ourselves in the same field as the lobbyists and the contractors. So our partners, our colleagues, are the change agents, the people who are thinking about how do we take society in a different direction. And that's why you're here. And actually, if we could pull up a slide, I wanted to just share with you a few thoughts that we've learned. These aren't directly related to the book, but they're the themes of the book. So the first is a Chinese proverb: if we don't change the direction we are headed, we will end up where we're going. And this is a group of people that understands our society is not headed in the right direction. The most vivid statistic that I keep coming back to is a United Nations statistic. They recently ranked the average life expectancy of all 200 countries around the world. And of course, the United States being the wealthiest nation in the world and more advanced knowledge of science and medicine than any nation in the world, in history, frankly, and spending more per capita on medicine than any other country. So where should the United States be? Are we number one? No, we're not one. We're not two. We're number 40. So what does that say about our diet, about our lifestyles, about our relationship to nature, about our relationship to each other, how we interact, where with the lack of economic opportunity? And everyone in this room is doing something to address that, and that's why we wanted you all in the same room with us. I want to share with you a way of thinking that I got out of the tea gardens. It's something that stuck with me. So if we go to the next slide, this is a few slides from, well, just quickly, just to say, a lot of you were colleagues with me in the national service movement just when it was getting started. And if we had talked about back then, hey, Seth, if you look 20 years out, because it was 20 years ago we were on Treasure Island trying to figure out how to get that started. If you were to look 20 years out and you were involved in helping to eliminate billions of calories from the American diet, and also involved in, show the next slide, please, supporting the growth of organic agriculture, and also, the next slide, promoting fair trade labor standards, I'd say that sounds exactly what I'd like to do. Which is the nonprofit or government entity that I'm involved with? I would never have guessed it was a beverage company, let alone one that's now part of the Coca-Cola company. So, so how did we get here? Well, that's part of the story of the book. And I wanted just to share with you a quick series of slides that helped really shape my thinking. So about a few years ago, I went to a tea garden in China. And I had flown a long way and driven a long way and flown again and driven again. And eventually the road came to an end. And my host said, OK, now we get out and we'll walk down this river. And I'm saying, OK, great. We're here to see the tea bushes. I've flown all this way. This is time to see the tea bushes. And we got to the river, and there weren't any tea bushes that I could see. And there wasn't any bridge that I could see. So I said, well, where are the tea bushes? And they said, oh, it's just on the other side. It's across the river. And I wondered if I was in one of those Zen parables where you've already been with the tea leaves, you just didn't know it. And I said, well, have you thought about building a bridge? Because if you're involved in economics and commerce, that usually helps when you can bring your product to market. And they said, no, it's not about, they gave me 4 interesting reasons why they hadn't built a bridge. So the first one was, look, we're a poor province. We can't just put up a bridge just because that could make sense in the short term. Number 2, there's a lot of rain. This is a lot of flooding. It could be underwater one time a year and not at another point. Number 3, it's an organic tea garden. There's no need for heavy equipment or for large bags of chemicals or anything. But the most interesting thing they said was, if we build a bridge, then there'll be a road. If there's a road, there'll be infrastructure. And if there's infrastructure, there'll be pollution. So instead of a bridge, This guy comes up on a raft. It's a bamboo raft, and in the next slide, you'll see we got our feet a little bit wet, but we end up in the tea garden in the next slide. And for me, what was so interesting about that whole experience was I saw a problem, and I had a solution in my mind, but in fact, the problem was its own solution. And so often in our society, we look at problems. We're a solution-oriented society, and of course, organic agriculture is one of the most vivid examples. We see weeds in a field or pests in a field, and we have a solution, which is chemical compounds or toxins designed to kill those living organisms. And of course, we know now that those same solutions have other problems. I say sometimes we're creating so many solutions, we're killing ourselves. And for our business, Honest Tea, we certainly had our share of problems, and we'll share some of them with you. But one thing that I think so many of these organizations in this room face is lack of resources. That's always a challenge. We have a great quote from one of our investors who says, lack of ideas is not an obstacle. I'm sorry, lack of money, lack of resources is not an obstacle. Lack of ideas is an obstacle. And I thought as a good way to help get us all on the same page, I'm going to show you just a quick video of a campaign Honest Tea did. We have always embraced the guerrilla grassroots style of marketing and of building our organization. And so this was an example of a test we did, a social experiment, a national social experiment that was really a marketing campaign. So it was kind of disguised that way. We set up freestanding booths around the country, and we put a rack, and it said, a sign, $1 a bottle, it's the honor system. And then we stepped back, and we wanted to see the results. So before I show the video, any guesses how honest do you think people might be? Very? Percent, what percent? 75, okay. All right, so we'll show the video, and in addition to sort of watching what happens, think about this as a marketing investment, and think of it as a very low-cost marketing investment, and see what kind of exposure we got.
Just how honest are you in public if no one has their eyes on you, or at least you think they don't?
America's honesty has been put to the test using data gathered from experiments conducted in all 50 states.
The company behind Honest Tea set up an unmanned kiosk all across the states. Those kiosks offer drinks for $1 on the honor system.
All while secretly recording.
Did you pay $1 or are you a liar? A social experiment is actually underway.
Our company seeks to have this honest and direct relationship with our natural ingredients. And so we always wanted to test how much does the American consumer embody those same values.
Did you get a tea? No, I didn't. I don't have any cash, and I feel guilty not taking it.
In some situations, we actually had some people who tried to walk away with a rack of tea just to see what, if anyone would call them out, and no one did.
And in some states, your experiment really paid off. Alabama, Hawaii, 100% of the people paid.
Isn't that impressive?
We track observable characteristics such as male, female, if you have a hat on.
Someone put a $5 bill in, and all they took was one drink, so they said they were extra honest.
There's some beauty in the honor system when it works. It really is.
The District of Columbia, they were the lowest. So those politicians in Washington, only 80% of them were honest.
To add insult to injury, our office is based very nearby. So I actually took the metro in, and when I got back to the metro, my bike had been stolen. So.
Oh.
And you paid?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Someone else took the tea and then sent you a letter with money inside later apologizing. So obviously there's remorse out there.
Based on the numbers from last year, it was really honest. It was mostly between 90 and 100% honest. And it kind of makes you feel good about society and, the way we're headed.
Hirshberg up So you'll hear a lot of different what we call our bottle cap quotes. So the one that is on the wall of Honest Tea's office and actually is at the start of the book is another Chinese proverb: "Those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt the people doing it." And you all know that because you're the people doing it. And of course, there's barriers. If there weren't barriers, it wouldn't, it'd be too easy. It would be done. But this is the work that's important to do around diet, around economic opportunity, around lifestyle, around changing our relationship with the natural world to bring it closer to harmony. And the person I want to now invite up, Gary Hirshberg, is someone who's been an incredible inspiration for me. He is definitely one of the heroes in the book, and literally a hero to Honest Tea, because when we got started, we were having challenges as a business. I had no experience in the beverage industry, no real experience in the natural foods industry. And Gary really took me under, not just me, my family under his wing, and his wife was both a mentor and a reassuring hand to my wife. And his family helped our family get through some very rocky times. And I don't know that Honest Tea would have gone out of business without Gary, but it definitely would not have ended up where it is. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Gary Hirshberg.
Thank you. That does not mean that I'm responsible for Coke. Okay, I just want to be clear about that. I just want to say a couple of words. First, this is such a beautiful story. Seth and Barry have really, I think, invented a future. They've helped us all to see hope in this sort of artificial line between for-profit and non-profit. This idea that over here is where you make money and rape the earth, and over here is where you do the good, work to correct for all of that. This is a wonderful story, and the book is great. And I hope you'll all take a copy. We started Stonyfield in 1983. We had 7 cows. And I often say that, and it was actually a nonprofit. It was an intentional nonprofit. It was an organic farming school, and Reagan had come in and slashed funding for education and for organic agriculture and basically renewables and most of the stuff we were doing. And so we needed a means of self-support because the competition for philanthropy just tightened up when the federal dollars dried up. And so my partner, we used to sit at these board meetings, and my partner had at that point 1 cow in the school, and he would feed us this amazing yogurt. And one day, one of us said, "Why don't we start selling this stuff?" And honestly, it was about as crazy as that. It took us 9 years to make money after that. I often say that we had a wonderful company back then. We just had no supply and no demand. It was crazy, right? Very few people were eating yogurt, and nobody knew about organics. And yet, like Seth and Barry, we sort of dared to dream that maybe this could. We knew that we had science on our side. We knew that Americans are really making ourselves sick. In fact, the sort of paradigm, the myths upon which we've built modern agriculture in the last 50, 60 years, we're becoming exposed to at least a handful of folks. Myths like the idea that we can put toxins into the topsoil and that goes to some mythological place called away. We know that with climate change, that there is no such thing as away. Myths like that nobody would actually utter these words, but myths like that the earth is a subsidiary of our economies, that it's there for the taking and the dumping. It's kind of ours to be taken, when in fact the exact reciprocal is really true, which is all economies have been made possible by a bountiful earth. So we just set about to see if we could put a couple of cows together and make something of it. And today it's a $400 million company, and you've heard it's one of the largest in the country, and certainly the largest organic yogurt company in the world. And the good news, I guess, is as our businesses have grown, is that so too has a whole industry. Organics is now $35 billion in annual sales. We enjoy an compounded annual growth rate as an industry of about 20%, which is certainly extraordinary, and that's been true for about a dozen years. The bad news is that we're about 4% of U.S. food. The bad news is that 1 in 3 children born after the year 2000 is going to be a type 2 diabetic, and that's 1 in 2 if you're African American or Hispanic. The bad news is that a baby born in any city in America today is likely to have somewhere between 70 and 120 chemical compounds in her tissue at the moment of birth. The bad news is that thanks to the very successful strategy of developing herbicide-tolerant, genetically engineered crops for herbicide tolerance, we now have seen a skyrocketing in the use of herbicides, so that the USGS reported just a month ago, that US Geological Survey, that we're now breathing glyphosate, breathing Roundup in the Midwest, levels that have never been seen or heard of. So I'm not the most depressing guy you've ever met, and I won't stay on this. But the point is, to bring this to a close and to get into the dialogue, is that these days I'm obsessed with scale. We know the business side works. You see it with Honest, you see it with Stonyfield, you see it with many other wonderful companies. We know we're supporting 1,400 dairy farmers. They're all making money. Average herd size is 92 cows. It was said back, not that long ago, that you couldn't make money at 92 cows. And that's the average. So we've got plenty of 40 cow farmers making money. We know that we're not only reducing toxicity, we're actually improving soil health, we're actually sequestering carbon, we're keeping dollars in local circulation, they're not being exported for unnecessary chemicals and compounds and inputs. We know that our farmers make money, we know that our employees make money, and we know that essentially what we're both in the business of is actually preventative health care, which everybody in this room knows is the cheapest form of health care there is. Not getting sick is the way it ought to be, and so we know all of this works. What we haven't marshaled is the economic and the political clout to take this whole sort of paradigm to scale, and that's why I don't normally show up in a tie, but that's where I'm spending my time on the Hill these days. I'm spending a lot of time working on policy. Everybody in this room knows this town is broken. Our political system is broken, but we do have data on our side, and we do have also the most fundamental strength and asset that Seth really and Barry have really taken advantage of, and that is that we have something that people want. I have yet to meet the consumer who says, give me the yogurt with more synthetic growth hormones. Give me the one with the double dose of pesticides, please. I mean, there's 1,000 reasons to eat organic food. There's only one reason not to, and that's a good one, and that's that it's more expensive. And it's a problem, obviously, and that's the reason that we're not 10 and 20%. But that gets into politics, it gets into subsidies, there's a lot of issues having to do with scale, which we could get into in the discussion if you'd like. But the bottom line is, I think what we all should be doing tonight is taking pride, taking stock in these incredible successes, and then concentrating on how we go from here, how we expedite evolution. I was telling Seth and Julie earlier, my 3 kids are now no longer kids; they're now up and out, and all through adolescence, their parents were their embarrassment. We were referred to as the organic freaks in their lives. They hated it when their friends would come over and open their fridge and there'd be organic butter and organic cheese and organic cereal. But now, as college kids and young adults, they have, of course, they've gotten it. If I can just keep my mouth shut and not gloat, I'll do just fine. But younger generations understand this, are justifiably skeptical of a world that has been that led by singular focus on profits is not ultimately a giving world, is not ultimately a sustainable world, and the kind of balance that Seth and Barry have exhibited and talk about in their book is really a model for all of us. So, with that, I'll shut up and get to some discussion. Okay, thanks.
Well, sort of the news hook, among other things, for this evening is the fact that you wrote a book with your business partner, your co-founder, friend. And so let's talk a little bit about the book, and then we can go a little wider and then take some questions from the audience. First of all, obviously you have a tremendous passion. And at some point, what was it that made you think this needs to be a book? And then secondly, that this needs to be a graphic novel?
So I was reading a lot of green business books. I should say trying to read them. And I think we all will admit we have a few business books on our shelves that maybe we cracked the first chapter, got a little bit through, and then said, just put it to the side. And at the time that I was trying to do that, my oldest son was in his senior year of high school, and he had officially entered senior year slump. He was into college, he was coasting, and bringing home comic books that were actually very absorbing. And so my job was to be the disciplinarian and say, hey, Jonah, you really got to be cracking down. You can't let your grade slip. But I would pick up the comic books, and I would sort of be peeled. My wife would walk in. We'd both be sitting there reading comic books together. And I say, wait a minute. We've got to make a business story as engaging, as come alive as these comic books do. And our story is one that lends itself to it, whether it's the tea gardens, the label designs, the bottling plants. And so it just kind of evolved. And I reached out to my co-founder, Barry, who was no longer in the business because we had just sold the business to Coke. And it was another opportunity to work with Barry, still also with Gary. And I said, and Barry said, just like the world didn't need another beverage, it didn't need another book, another business book. But if we could do it differently, make it more accessible, change the presentation, it was worth trying.
And so, well, first of all, congratulations, because I understand it's on at least a couple of bestseller lists.
Yeah, it's off to a good start.
So, I can imagine at some point, despite your passion, or perhaps because of it, your own success has been somewhat a pleasant surprise, right? But because you were toiling so mightily as you tell the stories in this book. So, first of all, how do you rationalize your success at this point, and the success of your company, and by extension, the book?
I don't rationalize it. I have a lot of pinch me moments. This is a pinch me moment to be able to share with this community, what we're building as a group, and to be a part in it is really exciting. So there are definitely times when I can't believe, I'm sitting in front of a national restaurant chain that, we never would, or we're talking to a Coca-Cola distribution organization that can cover the whole country. So it is a wild thing, and every once in a while I'll step back, but most of the time I'm just focused on what's immediately around me and trying to keep it all together.
So, you have, I can tell you have a lot of, sort of very organic supporters here this evening. And about the marketing of Honest Tea and the associated products, how many people are sort of casual purchasers of it? How many people buy it because of the very multi-leveled story that's associated with it? And then how do you, obviously now that Coca-Cola's the parent, how do you evangelize, if that's the right word, that story and the product to a broader market?
So we do have some core consumers, really people who are passionate, who ask if we can do their banking, who ask if they can be our neighbors, who get Honest Tea tattoos, and that's wonderful to see. But for the most part, we're very well established in the natural foods channel, but there are, we're still under 20% national awareness. So we still have a lot of work to do, not as much in the natural foods world, but beyond that. And that's where, if we're going to change the American, we use the phrase democratizing organics to get this product into people's hands who should have access to healthy and natural food, but don't. And so how do we not just make it available to them, but make it relevant, make it something they want to experience? And so that's still a challenge. And examples like that campaign we did are one way to do it. But we're still, I'd say, we're still on a curve in terms of growth and raising awareness.
Gary, any reflections on his comments so far?
Well, I think the issue is, obviously, it's an incredible product, and I'm going to suggest that anybody who asks a question tonight has to start with, what's your favorite flavor? Because I'm curious. Cranberry lemonade has become my new addiction. No, I think the issue is that cheap food isn't cheap. It's really expensive, but we don't understand that as a mass populace yet. Diabetes costs this country $200 billion a year. Obesity is double that. Cancer, the President's Cancer Panel says that 41% of Americans alive today are going to be diagnosed with cancer in our lifetimes. That's a multi-trillion-dollar problem. And anybody here who's had an experience with cancer knows it's a whole lot more expensive to deal with, just from a physical point of view, let alone emotional, after you've been diagnosed than to prevent. And so what we need to do, and I think the Coke relationship is probably worth a discussion at some point here, if you'd like, because it's obviously it's challenging. Can one hold on to your values inside a company that obviously puts a heck of a lot of sugar and corn syrup solids and GMOs out there? And I would say yes, it can, but I think that might be a discussion.
Can I walk us through that discussion then?
Yeah, please.
Obviously, the fact that both of you built these companies in the way you did, I can imagine that you went through all kinds of thoughts about how the future was going to present itself. And obviously, at some point, you decided that Groupe Danone should buy your company, and I understand they bought, what, 85%?
Now they own 85, yeah.
85. And you sold the entire company?
I still have a piece, but for the most part.
Do you care to tell us how much?
I have about 5%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at what point did you decide that deal, and I mean, respectively, these deals were the thing to do? Let's start with Gary, since you've got more years behind you.
More gray hair. Yeah, you can say it. No, again, this issue of scale is the key. You can't fake. You can't. There's no way to fake good or high quality. You have to pay for it somewhere. You have to pay farmers to use certain kinds of practices, to not use chemical shortcuts, in my case, to let their animals get access to grass, and our cows are grass-fed for the most part, and not use the cheap shortcuts. And so that means your cost of goods is more expensive. Now, if you just think about the sort of food business for a moment, and anybody or anything that you buy, you realize there's this sort of paradigm out there, which is that modern commerce is about making products as cheap as you possibly can. And let's use an example like Coke, where there's nothing really cheaper than sugar, water, and corn syrup solids, and that's about it. That's what's in there. And some CO2. There's some CO2, okay? It's widely available, carbonation. And then what you do is you charge as high a price as you can with these cheap goods. So with that big gross margin, you can then buy lots of advertising to just punish us with messages. So, Super Bowl ads and so on and so forth. So we're just being blasted all the time. And it works. Advertising does work as a purchase influence. We are stuck. Our cost of goods is high. We believe we have this crazy idea that our farmers ought to survive. So we pay them a price where they can actually make money, which, by the way, the average dairy does not. You should know, conventional dairy farmers are mostly struggling. So, the so-called natural products out there pay about half of what I pay to an average dairy farmer. About $12 for 100 pounds of milk. I pay about $27 to $30. And that's what it costs for the farmers to produce. So I can't compete on cost of goods, so therefore I need to compete in some other way, and that's where scale comes in. When the simple, easy way to picture this is when we first started with buying milk after we outgrew the farm, the 19 cows, we had one farmer in Vermont and one in Maine, and so the drive, the number of miles, the number of dollars per gallon of milk that we're picking up was really high. But as we got more to scale, we could pick up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 farmers in Vermont and so forth and make the cost of that distribution better. Well, that's what, if we're going to get this idea to scale, then we need partners who can help us to do that. And my decision, I could have taken the company public. I watched Ben and Jerry's do that. But that's basically selling the company, and it's also losing control. Or I could do, in my case, a controlled deal with one of the largest dairies in the world who knew a lot more about manufacturing and supply chain and purchasing than I ever was going to. And indeed, they've added 5, 6, 7 gross margin points, which has enabled me to keep my growth going without screwing the farmer, without hurting my supply chain. So the tea plantations here are able to be protected with the right price, and at the same time, Seth's able to compete. I'm able to compete out there. It comes down to sort of a cow-eat-cow world out there, right? I mean, it comes down to you have to really fight fire with fire. And this myth of natural, don't fool yourselves. There's literally no definition of natural. You can have anything you want in there and say natural. And so, if you really want to be in the business of avoiding toxins and sequestering carbon and doing all the good things that organic says, then you have to pay. But we understand that higher price is an impediment. So we've got to find a way to close that margin, and scale's the way to do it.
How did you know that you had a good steward in the company that bought your
Well, in my case, so I had 297 shareholders. This was not intentional. This was because of those 9 years of not making money. We wound up you know, I used to say anybody with a necktie was fair game. I was just constantly fundraising, and you know, mom and mother-in-law and everybody else, you know, I could get my hands on that. I mean, the UPS guy didn't like to come up for fear we'd hit him up for a loan. I mean, it was rough sledding. So I needed to provide an exit to those folks, but at the same time, I didn't want to sell the business to just anybody. I didn't want to do a highest bidder. So I didn't have to sell because nobody had enough. I was still the largest shareholder, my partner and I. So we did essentially a controlled auction. We went out and we told all these suitors who all wanted us in their portfolio that we would sell to the company who gave us what we wanted. And we had a list, a punch list. And you know, we wanted to keep our 10% profits for the planet. We wanted to keep you know, we wanted no interference with organic purchasing. We wanted, you know, a whole slew of demands. And Danone stepped right up and said yes. And actually, even more, they allowed us, even though they did buy, as you said, 85%, they left me with majority control. I wound up with 3 of the 5 board seats, 60% control, which sounds anti-capitalistic, but if you stop and think about it for a second, you know, organic just mystified them. They didn't understand how we, with 10 gross margin points deficit out the back of our factory, we're nevertheless making the same profits as them down at the bottom line. So it's been great, and we've launched several organic ventures under Danone since then. We had a carbon footprint tool that we used in our own business as a measure of our own success and mission, and now Danone has required that same, they've adopted that tool. It's used, every single manager all over the world has to subject themselves to that tool. It's part of their annual performance reviews. And we work, Mohammed Yunus, I think probably a lot of folks here know Mohammed. We formed an organization called Danone Communities. I'm on the board of it, doing micro-enterprise work, helping grassroots enterprises in the poorest nations on earth, mostly organic ventures. So, you know, they've proven their mettle. They get a lot of credit. They've stuck with what they said, but that was also the only way I would have done the deal.
So Seth, when did you know that you were ready to sell, and why was Coca-Cola the one to do it?
So it's interesting. Gary, you know, mentioned that he was a nonprofit in business for 9 years, and Honest Tea was the same. So we actually share a lot in common with the nonprofits here. And we were growing very quickly, but what we saw was that we were not being able to get the opportunity. We're not able to capitalize on the opportunity. So we had a lot of national chains that wanted the product, that wanted to, whether it was Target or other Safeway, and we didn't have the distribution to cover it. They'd say, we love the product, we need it, we see our consumers want it. Can you get it? Can you get it to us? And we said, we just don't have the distribution. And so we were really running into a barrier. And so we knew we needed a distribution partner. We also were approached by a lot of the other food and beverage companies around the world. And Coke was the one that was most open to us keeping control the way we did. And our deal was modeled in some ways after Gary's, though a little different. And so Coke invested for the first 3 years. They were a minority shareholder, and Gary was on our board along with Barry and me. And then over time, they had the opportunity to exercise, to buy the rest of the company. And I think for both of us, one of the things we've done to help secure what we've done, sort of protect a good offense is a good defense, we basically embedded the values of our brands in our products. So Honest Tea is organic. It says it on the cap. That's what we've built. All of our teas are fair trade certified. That's what we've committed. In fact, we committed to that after Coca-Cola invested. And when we talk about mission in a bottle, the point is, even if we don't have any profits, and this goes back to the beginning, we're still selling a product that's lower in sugar, organic, and fair trade. And if that's where the market value, that's where the brand is established, that's how we protect it going forward.
And how do you ensure that Coca-Cola is making correct decisions after the proverbial cow is out of the barn now?
Well, in this case, I'm still running the company. That's the best way to make sure the decisions are made the right way. There's no long-term protection. The only protection is that if this is what we're building, if this is where the value of the brand is, Coke probably more than anybody, if you remember the whole new Coke experience, learned you don't mess with something that is working.
Well, it's also, I mean, just to be direct about it, the only way you really ensure the DNA perpetuates is performance. I mean, it's as simple as that. And so it's incumbent on us to continue to grow the franchise and grow the conversation. The flip side of that is picture yourself as Coke right now. You've got a diabetes epidemic, you got an obesity epidemic. Seems to be leveling off among young people, but no one's really sure if that's a sustainable curve. You've got a national health care crisis, and you are, probably one of the 5 primary causes. I mean, sodas is one of the giant reasons that sugar consumption has spiked. If you're Coke or Pepsi, you're running, not walking, to try to find ways to diversify, because sooner or later there's going to be, I call it a sugar tax. I don't know what it is, but we need to stand up. This is us now. I'm talking about us peeps. We need to start demanding accountability for, which is why, again, I don the suit and say it's time to, turn our consumer power into political power as well. It's the same thing in my space. There's a paradigm here. I chair a national campaign to get labeling of genetically engineered foods. We're one of, all of our major trading partners have labeling, 64 nations around the world. Really progressive countries like Russia and China and Saudi Arabia give their citizens the rights to know if they're eating genetically engineered foods. We don't have those rights here. The argument that you hear, which is a brilliantly, diabolically put together argument over on the other side, is, well, we need GMOs to feed the world, they get higher yields. They've been saying that since the early 90s. There is no evidence yet of higher yields from GE foods, despite what you hear, despite Bill Gates and everybody else talking about it. Our campaign is not anti-GE, it's pro-transparency, though, to give consumers, citizens, the right to choose the kind of paradigm. Because as I mentioned, unfortunately, one little thing that they don't talk about with GE foods is it's leveraged an absolute calamity, an expediting of the use of these chemicals that the crops are engineered to be resistant to. So we need to become political. We need to become active. It's not enough to just consume, those of us who have the means to buy these excellent products. But again, if you're Coke or any of these large companies, these companies are as dependent as we are on their reputations, right? The Tylenol kind of problem, the worst thing that can happen is something that really undermines your reputation, and the last thing they want is to be identified as being the problem. So Seth becomes part of the solution.
So you don't give him grief for selling to Coca-Cola then?
No. I mean, honestly. So here's the thing.
Because you have been needling him a little bit.
Yeah. No. Listen. You should see me at the Coke board meetings. I'm a barrel of laughs down there. I'm here. I'm Mr. Anti-GMO, and Coke is corn. Okay, but they let me talk every once in a while. No. Look. We started our company 30 years ago. We started 2015. We don't have another 15 years to get some of this right. We definitely don't have another 30 years. When you look at toxicity, when you look at climate change, when you look at obesity, diabetes, cancer trends, et cetera, we have to expedite evolution, as I've said. And unfortunately, these big companies are not going to just surrender and say, yeah, we've read Gary's book or Seth's book. You're right, we quit. Here's the keys, run the shop. They're going to keep on being economic powers. We just have to move things along. And I think I'm not Pollyannish about this. It's not easy, but working from inside these companies is a very powerful place to get leverage.
Do you think the companies can lead the product creation ahead of the consumers?
That's what the entrepreneur does. That's what both of us did. We took a concept that was not proven, that they wouldn't bet on with their own money. We bet our own money and our parents' money or whoever else was willing to put some money in. And we managed to show that there was market demand for it. And then, if we can do that successfully, then it's a little bit less risk for them to try to take it to scale.
But let me paint a different slant on that. So we were the first. So 30 years ago, I was eating Greek yogurt in Crete and just fell in love with it and tried for 25 years to make it here, and nobody would buy it. It was just too thick, and finally, but I kept trying, and finally, we became the first domestic yogurt company to produce Greek yogurt. You've all seen what's happened, right? It's 50% of the market now. We were right. But unfortunately, we were also organic, so we were more expensive. And what happened is now 22 yogurt companies are making Greek yogurt. And and you can always find one of them for sale at $1 a cup. I cannot sell at $1 a cup. So what happened was we won the foot race to get started, but we're now a tiny percentage of a. Now there won't be 22 players for long. It'll straighten out. There'll be 3 or 4 or 5. But again, this is where you need the power. You need the scale. We need to be smart about this. We also need to be better educators. This notion I've been sharing with you about natural versus organic, there's a lot of confusion out there. People say local, 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 and of course, anytime you can buy local, it's great. But I can tell you there's local farms around me. I would not buy their milk. It's not the only virtue. We need to look at a total picture, and part of that picture is toxins and our farmers being properly paid, and so on. So this isn't easy stuff. This is ruthless, and it's a challenge. But again, Seth's absolutely correct. This is why I said at the conclusion of my opening remarks, I think what you should take out of this story and out of this book is make your dreams come true. I mean, that's what these guys did. They had a dream. They had an idea. And look, I've been traveling in 3 cities already today, and it's at every counter I've been in. I wish our yogurt was as well distributed.
Yeah, there you go. I want to ask one more question, then we'll open it to the audience, and then we'll have a book signing afterward. I think a lot of people came for that as well. I talked to a lot of people about the notion of being an entrepreneur. The United States still, in many ways, is among the best countries in the world for that, and maybe despite ourselves, right? So, whether you're speaking to somebody here this evening or to the broader audience, there are people who are wondering whether they should take that step, right? And obviously in an economy that's not creating as many jobs as people would like, not to mention people who are looking for jobs. In some ways, you two are unlikely entrepreneurs by the traditional definition, but obviously you've been tremendously successful. So how do you counsel individuals about whether they should take this step? I mean, you worked at a mutual fund company before, so it wasn't as if you came from something that was unassociated with business.
Right, but a lot of the people in this room are entrepreneurs. They're nonprofit entrepreneurs, and I think I think both of us were got our start as nonprofit entrepreneurs as well. So I think that the guideline that I certainly live by, and the successful entrepreneurs that both Gary and I have supported and have a passion. They have kind of a fire in their veins about they want to change the way, whatever it is, whether what people drink, the way babies have access to food, and just have that unfailing passion, because it takes so much resilience. It is like so many of the people in this room who, whether you're getting rejected by funders or go through an economic downturn, you just have to find a way to get back up. And the only thing that keeps you coming back, it's certainly not the money, it's the belief system.
Is it not? But it has to be more than passion, isn't it? It has to be some ability, right?
Ability counts, there's no question, and obviously in a business like ours, it has to have meaningful differentiation in the marketplace. But if there was one quality I could choose, to back someone, they've got to have that passion.
Gary?
Yeah, I mean, passion and I think determination is probably the most underappreciated but necessary ingredient for success, and that's certainly what Honest Tea represents. I run an entrepreneurship institute every year. Seth has come up and spoken at it, and it's nonprofit and for-profit entrepreneurs. As you can tell, we don't make any distinction there. Basic cash flow is the first hour. So passion's good, determination's good, but learning from our errors, make your own errors, but don't make ours again, is really the key. It's storytelling, it's not lecturing, it's experiential, and I show all the mistakes I've made with cash flows, and it's pretty eye-opening. Maybe just also by way of heading into the Q&A, I just point to one thing that showed up on Seth's video, and I'm going to embarrass someone here, but Seth, you saw the Honest Cities program, the money went to Food Corps. Well, the founder of Food Corps is sitting over here. Some of you probably know Deb Eschmeyer and her colleagues. And, it's a great example of this partnership is a great example of, I think, where we can leverage our experience is, we can help nonprofits to be more businesslike by, again, sharing our mistakes, but we can also get a lot from that partnership. Stonyfield does not advertise. We partner. We partner with many of the groups here, just as Honest Tea does. And, what they're doing at Food Corps is they're educating the next generation of food activists. And that's a very powerful way to, it's one thing to sell and get people excited and have people try stuff, but as you pointed out, some of it is it just tastes good. It isn't because necessarily they've read the book or read the story. So leveraging our experience by fertilizing and incubating and helping entities like this, again, expedite evolutions, I think a really important part of our job.
Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and open it to questions. I don't know, do we have microphones on the floor? Okay, so I'll ask you to raise your hand and I'll call on you and then we'll get a microphone over to you. We'll start on the farthest side over there to my left, your right. Yes, Jim. Yes, sir.
Hi.
Please identify yourself.
I'm Chris Gallagher. I've known Gary for years, and I've known Seth for less time, but still for a long time. And the question I have is, Gary will recognize that I used to try to pull him into politics at a time when he felt he'd have to compromise his principles in New Hampshire, and he came in, thank heavens, and things have turned out okay. And Gene Shaheen is now a senator, and that's all good. But I wanted to ask you, Seth, do you draw a distinction between Kroger's, Whole Food, Safeway, and what do you do when McDonald's says they want to serve? Because you can get to scale, but that's a slippery slope. And do you have any defining points that would help the rest of us know how much we have to sell out to reach scale?
It's a good question, and it's one I have, like Gary, I've always dabbled with an interest in politics. I used to work in the Senate. And so my fear of business was that I would be compromising. And I have to say that I guess some people would say I compromised by selling to Coca-Cola, but there's been no compromise around the product. So when we are actually now, we have Honest Tea just signed a national contract with a chain called Smashburger. It's a restaurant chain. We're also in trial with another national restaurant chain. And I don't have any, and it's a fast food chain, so they sell all the things that Gary was talking about. But the product, the Honest Tea product they sell, is without compromise. It's organic, fair trade, low sugar tea. And so I don't have any hesitation. Anyone who wants to sell the product that I'm making on my terms, I'll sell it anywhere. And that's my goal, is to make it as available, because everyone should have access to this kind of product. And there was a time where they said, well, we like your tea, but we want it sweeter. I said, then you don't want our tea. So sometimes that's hard because it's a national customer. It could be a big deal. But as long as you can be transparent and consistent about it, I don't lose. We'll sell to Walmart. We sell to Target, Kroger, Safeway, obviously Whole Foods, and the co-ops. Those are our our core. But if it's a product sold on our terms, which we do control it, sell it anywhere.
So you draw a line in the cane sugar, so to speak. What is the top level of how do you judge what is the maximum allowable
for low
amount?
sugar?
Yeah.
For us, it's 50 calories per 8-ounce serving. We have a line called Honest Kids, which has just exploded. It's drink pouches. When we came into the market, all the drink pouches were at 100 calories per pouch, and we came out at 40. And it's just continued to steal share. And in fact, what's happened is the market has shifted. Now the average calorie per pouch is 75. So I don't want to take credit for that, but we've demonstrated you can be commercially successful at a lower calorie profile.
Okay.
Let me add to the answer here to Chris's question. We in this town and in our state in New Hampshire, we are always obsessed with elections. This is how we as a democracy express our concerns. But the reality is we don't just vote every 2 years or 4 years. We vote every single time we purchase. And I think we have to understand that, especially the folks who are in this room today. I mean, educated folks who can take the time, who have the discretion and means to come to an event like this, need to understand that what we've discovered in commerce is that, corporate America, these large companies, including the heads of McDonald's, tally those votes. They spend billions of dollars to tally those votes. And when you run an item past a scanner, you're voting for local or organic or not. And so those of us who have the means, you don't have to run out of here and feel like you need to buy everything organic, although it's not a bad idea. But even when you buy one thing, it's sending, I mean, imagine if, all of us go out tonight and buy a organic yogurt, for example. You never know. Stranger things have happened. No, seriously, I mean, those votes count. And, McDonald's has Newman's Own organic coffee. There's a reason for that. It's selling. It's going through. And then, I could tell you what the footprint is, because we don't just have carbon footprints. We have toxic footprints and water footprints and so on. It's a significant footprint. So I'm with Seth. I think wherever this stuff can sell, it should. Walmart and Costco are crucial because for a heck of a lot of Americans, it's the only place they can afford to shop. And it's hard on their competitors because they do make our products cheaper. But you know what? That's part of the game here. So, but we educated folks have a role to play in this. We need to understand that there's real political power in those purchases, and we need to make them consciously.
Okay, who's next with a question? I'm actually here in front, please.
Hugh Grindstaff. I apologize for coming in late, but I'm diabetic. What do you have in store for me?
Well, we have we have teas with absolutely no sweetener. So just green tea or just black tea have no calories. We just launched, and this was interesting, Gary and I had an interesting dialogue about it. We just launched a line called Honest Fizz, which is a 0-calorie, naturally sweetened soda line. It's really, and one of them is organic. It's the first of its kind. So we had a debate because although one is organic, the others aren't. It was the first time in 8 years that we brought out something that wasn't organic. And so it was a debate we had at our advisory council. Is a mission organic or is it health? And where's the cutoff? Well, the long-term mission is always organic. This was a case where the sweetener, the premium, was so high we would have lost that ability to democratize it. But the line is done very well already. So.
And on my side, it would be plain yogurt, and this is actually where the Greek yogurt comes in, because when in the straining, the lactose is strained out, and that's where a lot of the natural milk sugar is. So you got a higher protein, lower carb item.
So there you go. Yes, sir, in the back.
Hi, Gary, friend of Chris Gallagher's. Listening to the fairly bleak description of what we have been consuming makes me think the tobacco industry was probably hearing something similar 50 or 75 years ago, who knows. But I imagine both of you have run up against roadblocks from the established products because you are messing with their business of selling carbonated sugar water at huge margins. Can you share kind of the stories of what you have run up against, and in some ways, Seth, you particular, you are now kind of in the same tent as that carbonated sugar water, and there's somebody on the other side of the table whose business you're threatening.
Sure. Well, in the beginning, one of the things the book really sometimes painfully documents is our challenge just to get distribution. We had this product, we were in Whole Foods. We went to the beverage distributors and they said, this isn't sweet enough, this isn't, it's too expensive, it tastes a bit like grass, and we have a Snapple contract that prohibits us from carrying it. So there were literally barriers to distribution, and the only way we were able to get to the shelf was kind of going around these distributors. We went through cheese distributors or charcoal distributors, corned beef, anybody going to a store with a product, we would sort of put our product on the shelf. But what is, it's like I say, it still continues to amaze me after begging distributors to carry our product to now have the ability to cover the whole country. And it's Coca-Cola that's making that happen. It really is. They are, colleges and universities, as we all know, there's sort of Coke or Pepsi campuses. And it was never an Honest Tea campus. It was, we were never welcome. And so now we're part of the Coke campus or hospitals. And it's just amazing to see the ability they have to bring distribution to places. And it's kind of like, without us, they wouldn't have organic, low sugar, fair trade drinks. Now they do. So from my perspective now, Coke is on my side. They're selling a different product, absolutely. But the opportunities we're being presented with would never happen. Maybe in maybe 10, 15 years, with us keep doing it on our own, however we would have financed it, maybe. But it's happening now.
Most of the problems that you're asking about, and there's a book to be written of them, are solved by performance, by selling through. if your product is selling, the buyer will stick with you. And again, that puts a responsibility back on those of us who are educated and make our choices. I'm going to tell you a very quick story of how I learned this. In 1984, I was up at the farm. We had finished milking the cows, and it was my birthday party, and a bunch of my ex-Ultimate Frisbee teammates came up to the farm, and I blew out, and we had a little party there. I blew out the candles, and I'd been trying to get into Bread and Circus, now Whole Foods, for about a year in Cambridge, and they already had like 5 organic yogurts made, or natural yogurts made, by someone with their teepee and their wet goat, somewhere in Vermont or Maine or something. And so I said to everybody, most of them were from Boston, I said, why don't you, I said, it's wonderful that you've come to my birthday party, but if you want to give me a really great present, go down to Bread and Circus and ask for our yogurt. That was a Sunday. On Wednesday, the buyer called me from Bread and Circus. She said, Gary, I don't know what's going on, but demand has gone through the roof. She said, get that product in here right away, which of course we, took off the apron and drove it down that day. But it taught me then everything I need to know. If it pulls through, if they're in the business of selling to to us, to people, and if we demand it, we're good.
The young lady in the front, and then I think we'll wrap it up pretty soon, yes.
My name is Lauren Sargent. You guys have had, both of you had referenced that you've made some business mistakes early on, so I'd love to hear your top 2 biggest mistakes you've made and what you learned from them.
Oh, our most painful one was buying a bottling plant. It was just a disaster. For 6 years, we had a plant that was, we did produce our drinks there, but it produced so many more headaches than that. And it was a great lesson in, doing something that wasn't building value. Where we built the value was when we created a brand that was meaningful and we could continue to invest in it. Running a bottling plant was not about building that brand. And the most horrific example of that is documented in the book, where we had a product that wasn't an Honest Tea product, but a product that was produced at the bottling plant, where someone thought that they had found a male organ in the bottle, and it ended up on the Howard Stern show. It was just absurd. And easily,
It was not.
yes, it was not. It was mold.
It was a mold.
But it was like, this is absurd, and yet you can't make that stuff up.
So my biggest mistake was when we needed to make the Greek yogurt, and again, because you separate, you produce all this whey, which is a byproduct. We couldn't handle it at our facility, so I went to a little factory in Upper New York State. A guy was making cheese and taught them how to make Greek yogurt, and they kicked us out within 6 months, and that's Chobani. They're $1 billion company or something right now. So don't buy them. No.
Very good. Okay, one more and you'll be it. Yeah.
Personal question. I'm Susan Comfort. I direct Playworks here in DC, and so we're trying to scale Play, and Play promotes creativity, which promotes problem solving. You're problem solvers. I'm curious what you do for Play.
Play, it really is critical, and whether it's in the company or in personal life. So I actually try to find a way to play every day. I have 3 sons, only one of whom is home now, but our house backs right onto a park, so every Friday morning there's an Ultimate Frisbee game in the park. If my son gets his homework done in time, we get to play Settlers of Catan, if we are, which is not as physically active, but sometimes it's just running, which isn't play as much as clearing the mind. And I do want to share one element, because I know Gary and I both went through this, that obviously there's a lot of pressure when you're building an organization. I think everyone here can relate to that. And one of my favorite scenes from the book is actually just when the company launched, we were at a family picnic. It was the 4th of July. I was eating a piece of pizza, and I felt something crunchy in my mouth. I said, there's not supposed to be anything crunchy in pizza. It turned out my tooth had cracked. And so I went to the dentist, and I said, the tooth cracked. She says, yeah, well, it looks like you're grinding your teeth. Are you under any pressure? Yeah, I guess you could say that. She said, well, you got 2 options. You could do deep breathing and yoga and just try to relax, or I can fit you for a night guard. And I've been wearing the night guard ever since.
There you go. Gary, same question.
Well, my niece worked for you all, so I know Play works, and I'm a big fan. You know, those 9 years of not making money were just, you know, horrifically stressful. There was 1 year, and I won't go into it, it's too late to go into the whole story, but there was 1 year where we lost $25,000 a week. And this because of a whole series of disasters that happened. That went on for 50 weeks. And that's why I was making the joke about the UPS guy. I wasn't kidding. We were broke. We were living at the farm. You know, we had all the yogurt we could eat, but you know, not much else. But my local tennis court had free time at 10 p.m. And so I was out there. I mean, my wife was horrified. After these long days, I would, you know, not go back to be with her. I would go off, and I would hit this little yellow fuzzy thing, and literally the tears would just come off my cheeks. And that way, by the time I did get home, I was actually able to be a partner, because I couldn't have. I needed it. I learned then how critical it was. And so to this day, I'm with Seth. Every day there's something: tennis, frisbee, soccer.
That's great. Well, I just want to mention that after we wrap up here, we'll be offering the books for sale out front, and there'll be a signing opportunity there. How about a big round of applause for our guests this evening? Thank you very much, guys. That was great. Seth, could I ask you to sign my book real quick before you go on? And by the way, Moroccan mint is my favorite.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So feel free to go ahead and line up outside if you'd like to do that. It was a great program, guys.